All right, we've been working on the Niagara Creed. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at something that was in the news that kind of relates to where we are in the Niagara Creed, and then next week we'll go back and pick up the Niagara Creed. So let me explain. In the Niagara Creed, we've reached a section that deals with assurance of salvation, correct? And that paragraph seems to be straightforward, seems to be simple, but what happens when you deal with the subject of assurance of salvation, it's simple if you don't say very much. The more you talk, the more complicated the subject becomes. How does a person know if they're really saved? What do we look to? How do we know this? And the more people try to explain it, it sometimes becomes this really contradictory thing. So we will get back to that and continue to try to unpack that and try to look at that. That conversation has a lot to do and connects with the what I've been doing in the series on the Sermon on the Mount. If you go back and listen to that, we're dealing with the same subject there. So that subject comes up over and over and over. But what I want to do is take this idea of salvation and look at some pretty startling statistics that keep coming out pretty much, it seems like every month, and that the church at large is going to have to stop and go, what in the world is going on? And then we'll see how this relates to the subject of salvation, and then we're going to look at some scripture. So let's start with this information. And I know it's a Resurrection Sunday, and so people would probably prefer something more positive, but this is definitely not positive. This is pretty troubling, but we'll look at it. All right, here we go. Here's the first paragraph of this article. I'm not even going to give you the title of the article right now. An astronomical number of Christian young people are leaving the faith after they leave the nest. A recent New Lifeway research survey shows that 2/3 of Christian youth stop attending church for at least a year between the ages of 18 and 22. So there's the idea of 2/3 of Christian youth stop attending church. A study from the Assemblies of God showed that at least half and possibly over 2/3 of Christian young people will step away from the faith while attending a non-Christian college or university. A similar study from the Southern Baptist Convention indicates that they are currently losing 70 to 88% of their youth after their freshman year in college. Those are some staggering numbers. All right, so let's go through those again. 2/3 of Christian youth stop attending church for at least 1 year between the age of 18 and 22. That's 2/3, according to Lifeway. Assemblies of God, at least half and possibly 2/3 of Christian young people will step away from the faith while attending non-Christian college or university. Right? So that's half or possibly 2/3, right? And then Southern Baptists indicating that they're currently losing, so not like this is a current ongoing situation, between 70 to 88% of their youth are losing their youth after their freshman year in college. Freshman year in college, they're losing between 70 to 88%. Those are some staggering numbers. Now, some people will do the typical thing that Christians love to do. Well, they were never saved anyway. Next, move on, and not give it much thought. Okay, that is a pretty sad approach. Okay, because you're dealing with human beings who have an eternal soul. So we can't just shrug our shoulders and go, we got to try to understand this. And what does it say about salvation? And there's a lot of questions. The article goes on. It says most studies indicate between 45 to 40% of youth leave their church after their freshman year in college and never return. So almost 50% will never return. Almost 50% will just never return under any circumstances. That means we're losing at least probably close to half. All right? So that raises all kinds of questions. And it's always interesting to get the different perspectives. Usually Christian couples who are young, they always feel like they've got it all figured out, and it's never going to happen to their kids, and it's everybody else's because they don't know how to parent. And if you parent like them, they got it all figured out. That's always good when your kids are 2. Okay, you think you've got it all figured out, and you've got it figured out. Everyone else are idiots, and you've got it figured out. Typically, they change their tune when their kid is 18 or 19 or 20. They don't seem so arrogant anymore because parenting has a way of humbling you, right? And I always said. One of the things I remember way back early in the church is I said, I'm going to do very little teaching about how to parent because I don't know how it's all going to play out even for me. And so I always said that a lot of those people who write Christian books on parenting, they probably shouldn't, because then you find out that all of their parenting techniques didn't really work out. So we're going to look at this morning from a lot of different perspectives, okay? We are going to work through what this article has to say, and we will analyze it and critique it. But let's look at it first from a biblical perspective, all right? Go to 1 Timothy chapter 4, all right? 1 Timothy chapter 4. Now, this should not be read as just an excuse for it, but it has to be a part of the conversation. Does that make sense? Remember, and this is always important, before we look at the scripture, whenever we're dealing with I don't care what the issue is, I don't care if it's a political, social, cultural, religious, rarely can these issues ever be answered with simple answers. There are usually layers and layers of things to go, okay, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And we live in a world where everybody wants to respond to very controversial and complex issues with a tweet. And it doesn't work that way. Issues require, okay, well, what about this? And you've got to ask like 50 different questions and try to think it through. So we're going to look at this from a lot of different perspectives, and hopefully this will give some insight. But you see how this directly relates to what we're talking about in the Niagara Creed? How do you know if someone's saved? How do you know if someone's saved? Well, this comes into play right here, all right? So these young people leaving. So how do we understand this? What happened? What happened? Some will say they lost their salvation. Some will say they never had their salvation. Some will say they may still be saved. There's going to be all these different questions. So this is very relevant. So we're going to look at this. Let's first start with 1 Timothy chapter 4, and you'll see immediately why this passage is important. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Everybody ready? Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from meats which God hath created to receive with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. And then you can see what happens. But this gives an indication, at least, and we could build on it. But the Bible seems to indicate that as we move closer and closer to the latter days or to the end time, what does the Bible seem to indicate is going to be the condition of that time inside the church? A great falling away. Now, I know some systems of eschatology argue against that, but I think that that's the biblical understanding, is things are going to get worse and worse and worse, not better. So if these statistics are accurate, which those are a lot of different sources giving the same, that's Southern Baptist, Assemblies of God, Lifeway. Then there was another book that I quoted with almost 50% stat. So that's multiple sources doing their own studies. And there's national news articles where there's the Gallup have done all of these studies, and they're like, yeah, Christianity is dying. Christianity is dying. It's falling apart. Well, if that is true, well, then that, to me, has to we have to take into consideration, is it possible that we're seeing exactly what we're supposed to be seeing, and we should not be shocked and terrified by it? Now, we should be bothered by it, right? But not shocked or terrified, like, what do we do? What do we do? It may not be anything we can do. May not be anything we can do. Now, that doesn't mean we don't look and see what can we do better. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it may be beyond our control. We may be literally seeing biblical prophecy playing out right in front of us. And if we're Nobody knows when the end will be, but if we're headed that direction, then you can almost write this down, and you could go to Vegas and place a bet down. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. I cannot stress that enough. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And it's something that we're going to have to spend a lot of time considering. There's another passage I think that's also very important. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 3. I did some Bible study exercises on this. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. I know this is typically interpreted to be what's going to be happening in the world, and I think that interpretation may be wrong. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. Now stop right here. To me, verse 4, it gives you the interpretive clue. Why would that be there if you're talking about the world? Lovers of pleasure is more than a lover of God. Well, why would the world be out there going, hey, we used to love God? No, this is referring to the church. This is the church. This is what's going to happen inside the church. This is not, the world is all, that describes the world at every generation, at every time. This is what's going to happen to the church in latter time. Look at that. So what's going to happen? Perilous times are going to come on the church. And what is the church going to be made up of? Men who do what? Love their own self. They're covetous. They're boasters. They're proud. They're blasphemers. They're disobedient to parents. They're unthankful. They're unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. You get the idea. That's coming in the church. Now, does it mean we sit back and go, oh, this is wonderful? It means when we start seeing it happen in the church, what should that give you an indication of? That maybe that's where we are. So when we see these statistics, we may have to go, whoa. We are on the verge of seeing, and I hate to say this, we may see, maybe in our lifetime, and a lot of tangible ways, maybe here and around the world, basically the collapse of what I will call this mainstream corporate Christianity. We're going to see the collapse of it. The big, all of the big things that we witness are going to be slowly but surely disappearing. And Christianity is going to become something much smaller, no influence, and it's going to become, you're going to be not just in the minority, you're going to be in the minority of the minority of the minority. And there will always be something called Christianity floating around, but is it going to even anything look like biblical Christianity? Not. In fact, if you continue reading there, what does it go on to describe? Look at verse 5. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. Now, having a form of godliness, but denying the power, that seems to be referencing the church. It's going to have like a form of godliness, but it's going to be a mess. And what are we called to do? Turn away. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? I don't know. I don't even know what the answer is going to be. What is it going to look like? That's something we have to be prepared for. Maybe these statistics is really telling us something along those lines. So I want you to have that scriptural foundation before we even start looking at this. So does that make sense? So the first thing you need to do when we look at these statistics about all the young people leaving the church, what's the first thing you need to remind yourself? It could be simply an indicator of where we are in the prophetic timeline. It could be an indicator of that. And if it is, what should you be prepared for? It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. Now that's one thing for us to say as people who our kids are grown. That's really troubling for people, Seth and Lydia, with younger children. means your chances are in really bad shape, okay? Right? So that means that the church is going to get worse and worse and worse. And if Lincoln or Levi grow up and become Christians, that means whatever church they're going to be walking into in the future is going to be, who knows what's going to be left. So that means it's very important for Seth and Lydia to be training them to, if as they make a profession of faith, to train them that the church and what it's going to look like 20 years from now, I don't know what's going to be left of it. I don't know what's going to be left of it. We're already in pretty bad shape, and we've talked about that before. So I think that's very important. Now, second thing that we have to do, and this is very important, and this is where I have a hard time, so I'm going to talk about this one. So first, we need a scriptural foundation. Secondly, and I know this is a bad word to say now in 2021 within Christianity, but there needs to be some level of empathy here. All right? Now, I know that I'm not supposed to say that because empathy is bad now, but I'm going to say empathy. And I've got to try to speak of empathy on something that I cannot be empathetic about because I don't understand it. All right? I don't know what it's like to be raised in a Christian home. And from the time you're little, you're told Jesus, the Bible, God, heaven, hell, morality, and whatever your perception is. Remember, a kid raised in a Christian home, their perception of Christianity, no matter what you think as a parent that you did, I guarantee you it's probably different than your perception. Right? I don't care what kind of home they're raised in. I don't care what kind of Christian home they're raised, because you know there's different kinds of Christian homes, right? You've got the ultra conservative that you can't do anything but possibly breathe 2 times, and that may even be a sin, right? And then you've got those who are very, very, very liberal. But I don't care if they're from a liberal or from a conservative one, right? Though you listen to the kids tell the stories, and you'll be like, what home were you raised in? You weren't raised in my home, because their perception is so radically different than yours. You shouldn't be shocked by this, because if you talk to your parents, your perception of the way you were raised is probably very different than the way your parents perceive it. So this becomes very problematic when you're dealing with Christianity, because their perception about how they're raised becomes their perception of Christianity, which in reality, that perception may have nothing to do with Christianity. That has something to do with the way they were raised. The way you were raised does not equal Christianity. Christianity transcends the way your parents raised you. Your parents may have raised you, quote unquote, in what they think is a Christian way, and it may have nothing to do with Christianity. Because their parents who are Christian, you bring in a lot of your ideas and your philosophies and your morality and your understanding, and you mix it with your Christianity, and your kids take that as being Christianity. And that's always problematic. But there's very little you can do about that, because it's hard to tell your kid, no, wait, listen here. Because no matter what you tell them, they have their own perception. So just remember that they have a perception that's not our own. But here's the thing that's got to be hard. If you're a kid raised in the Christian home, right? And all you've ever known is heaven, hell, Jesus, sin, crucifixion, resurrection, morality. And then all of a sudden you start finding yourself at some point going, you know what? I don't know about this. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that's like to say, I'm going to walk away. That's got to be a difficult thing from a psychological standpoint. And that's why many in the world, they think, psychologists say a lot of religious raising of the children is basically child abuse, and they condemn it. But I understand why, because those are serious things to walk. You're not just walking away from, well, my mom and dad love tea, and I hate tea. That's easy to walk away from. But you're walking away from something where your parents are saying, you're going to go to hell. Do you know how traumatic that has to be? I can't even comprehend that. I don't even know what that's like. So there's got to be empathy from the parent. The kid can't, sometimes we instead of showing empathy, we almost show, how can I say this? Instead of showing empathy, what we tend to show is we take it like a personal attack upon ourselves, and we got to get ourselves out of we're not a part of the equation. It's not about us. Sometimes we feel like, well, they're rejecting us, or they're rejecting. Stop whining about how it makes you feel. It's not about you. It's about them making a decision that's got to be massively difficult from a psychological perspective. We always like, well, it hurts me. It's not about you. You don't count. Okay, it's not about you. It's about them making a decision that I can't even comprehend what it's like. I mean, I can't comprehend. Right? I wasn't raised in a Christian home, so I don't know what it's like. That's got to be hard to there. Now, I'm gonna say some harsh things to the young people who walk away, but from the parents, you understand how we can make it about us. What? Because whether we like it or not, what are other people out there on social media saying about my family? What are other people? Who cares? Right? Because if they're spending time talking about you, just give it a couple of months and you'll be able to talk about them. Okay, it's not about you. If you make it about you and how you feel and what people think about you, that is the epitome of selfishness. This is about a human being who's now making a very difficult decision to walk away from an entire worldview and throw it away that you are claiming has eternal consequences on their life. I can't even comprehend what that's like. There's got to be some empathy for how difficult that is. In fact, I have more respect. You've heard me say it so many times. I have more respect for a young person to walk up and go, you know what? I'm not a Christian. I don't know about this Christian thing. I'm walking away. I got respect for that. I don't take that personal. I don't get upset about that. That's great. Because at least you know where they stand. And there's honesty. And that's got to be a tough decision. So there's got to be a little I'm not saying empathize with the fact that they're turning against Christianity, but you empathize with how difficult that must be. That's a difficult thing. I mean, just think what you're walking away from. Again, you're not walking away from, well, Mom and Dad, you like this kind of food and I don't like this kind of. Who cares about that? This is dealing with eternal consequences. And sometimes it turns instead of empathizing, we almost see them as attacking us. They're not attacking you. Even if you feel that way, even if they say they're attacking you, it doesn't matter. It's not about you. It's about something bigger than us. Does that make sense? All right, hopefully, I know I'm going to offend all the parents there, but that's okay. All right, next. So first, what's the first thing? Scriptural foundation, right? Is that a prophetic fulfillment? Second, empathize, and don't make it about you. Don't make it about you. Empathize with them. Don't have them try to empathize with you. They're the one walking away and you're like, and you know how easy you can, we all parents do this. When your kids do something, you're always worried about how it's going to make you look. It's not about you, man. You're dealing with a human being. Get over yourself. Right? And it's, And I know within the Christian world, there's a lot of pressure on parents because you're told, hey, if you raise your kid in the fear and admonition of the Lord, they will not depart when they get old, as if it's a guarantee. And so then guess what? When that happens, then you feel like, what is everyone going to think about me? They're going to think I'm a bad parent. You're making it about you. And that's just, that is wrong. I'm just going to be dogmatically assert that is wrong. It's easy to do, though. Now, I got to empathize with parents who feel that way, right? Because it's easy to do, but just make sure we don't do that. Next. Are you ready? This is very important. We have to draw a distinction between leaving the faith and leaving the church. We have to draw a distinction between leaving the faith and leaving the church. Some young people, and these statistics, are leaving the church for a very... What frustrates me about this article is they neglect the other studies. And I'm going to put two studies together to show you what I mean. We cannot overlook the fact that in 2021, many young people are leaving the church in large numbers, not because they're rejecting Christianity, because they are rejecting churchianity. There is a drastic difference. There, I can't empathize. I can't empathize with that because I have stated, especially starting probably around 2015 moving forward, I've said it before, if this church didn't exist, I don't know where I would go to church anymore. I don't even know if I'd go to church anymore. And I know that sounds shocking because I feel like I'm an outcast in pretty much any church I walk into. That would not be me rejecting Christianity. That would be me rejecting churchianity and how messed up the church has become. And I get emails all the time from people who are like, I'm done with church. I'm fed up. I'm not going back. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. And that's not them rejecting Christianity, because some of those same people who don't go to church are the ones who, you talk to them about the Bible, they seem to know the Bible and theology better than people who go to church on a regular basis. All right? Now I'm not excusing that. I'm just saying we have to draw a distinction. Like, okay, you're walking away. What are you walking away from? What exactly are you walking away from? You have to be able to draw that distinction. There is a difference. And here is the reason why, right? So, number one, scriptural foundation, right? Is it a fulfillment of prophecy? Number two, empathy. And don't make it about you. Number three, draw a distinction between leaving the faith and leaving the church. Leaving Christianity versus leaving churchianity. Churchianity has never been Christianity, and the sooner you understand that, the better. Churchianity creates a false Christianity usually. All right? And I've preached against that forever. All right? Here's the next thing. This is why it's so important. Are you ready? This is so important. Have they left because of politics? Now, you may not believe this is true, and you may get offended by it, but the statistics are starting to come in, and they're not good. Here's from Religion News Service. Are churches willing to love their young people more than their politics? Now, that is a very important question. Are you willing to love young people more than you love your politics? Well, over the last 4 or 5 years, many in the church have chosen politic over young people. And a lot of young people have grown sick of it. And a lot of adults are to blame for it. All right? Because you may not realize it, but when you're all over social media posting your political nonsense, a lot of young people, guess in their minds, remember we talked about perceptions? Guess what they perceive that to be? They believe that they connect that with your Christianity, and they can't draw the distinction. You want to make all your political arguments in the world, but if your political arguments are driving people away from Christ, you may want to stop making your political arguments and start getting back to the Bible and theology. Because I'm telling you, your politics are not Christianity. And if you think they are, you've lost your mind. Because many of your political arguments, there's no scriptural justification for it anywhere at all. It's just what you believe. Well, that's fine. But your kids, what you've got to do is make sure that young people don't mix the two. Let's consider some of the things this article has to say. When asked why they stopped going to church, young people are increasingly prone to answer, I disagreed with the church's stance on political and social issues. They left the church because of the church's political. Why do they even know the church's political stance? Why? You know why? Because the church has become a political headquarters for a certain political party. I mean, look at the rise of patriot churches. Now, I've ticked off a lot of people in the patriot churches. I just got a message from someone last night saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm like, no, you go to a patriot church, you don't know what you're talking about. Not me. Because the fact that you call your church a patriot church tells me everything I need to know. Right? Because the church is not to be a patriot church. It's supposed to be a church dedicated to Jesus Christ, not to patriotism and love for country. Nowhere am I told to love country. I'm told to love Christ. In fact, I am told that I'm a stranger here, I'm an alien here, and my citizenship is in heaven. This whole nonsense about love for country, I don't get it. That's not the scripture. And don't argue with me about, oh, you don't care about your country. I served 19 years in the military so people can back off when they want to start attacking me on that. I get so sick of that. Okay, I've served, so just back off. But from a Christian perspective, my love is for God first. And if people see your love for country before they see, if you drape the Bible and an American flag, you are responsible for driving people away from the church. Christianity is not an American thing. That's why, what do we not have here? What will I never put here? What will I never put outside? Why? It's a church. It's a church. Not here to promote pro-America. What do we not do with 4th of July or Memorial Day? What do we, songs will I not let Lydia play? Okay? We're not going to do any patriotic songs. Okay? She can come in here with, I don't care. She can do Miley Cyrus for all I care. I would rather have that than a patriotic song. Okay? Okay? At least I know where she stands, right? Okay? And I'm joking, we don't do Miley Cyrus songs in our worship services. I'm joking there, but you get the idea. I would rather have that than a patriotic song. Because we merge the two together and it becomes problematic. A lot of young people, you may not like it, but they've grown tired of it. Now, in your generation, it's like, love country, say the Pledge of Allegiance, and all of that stuff. Well, the younger generation, they're not so down with that anymore. And it may bother you, but let it bother you, but don't merge that bother with your Christianity. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay, that's got to be understood here. In fact, let's read a little bit more from this because it's pretty important. Change is a part of the journey into young adulthood. The years in which Americans are most likely to move, attend college, and change jobs. This is part of the change. For the past 12 years, Lifeway Research, an evangelical firm that conducts research on the intersection of faith and culture, where I'm an executive director, has been studying how these changes affect the faith of young Protestant Christians. The results of our new survey are being released today. It turns out, perhaps not surprising, that as they grow, today's youth are also rethinking where the church falls into their life. What may surprise many church leaders, however, is the increase in those who say politics play a role in them walking away. And they go through the statistics, and we could talk all about it. Why? Young people, look, I don't care what you say, we can argue all day about it, but just you have to at least consider this perspective. There are a lot of young people who looked at the Christian parents and their dedication, loyalty, and support to Trump, and they went, what is this? My parents were the ones saying, character matters. You only elect someone who has a good character. Bill Clinton's character was horrible. He should never have been president. And then justify someone with a character very similar. And then they were like, I don't understand this. And then Trump, he would say this or say this or say this, and sometimes outrageous, completely ungodly things. And Christian parents were defending it. And Christian young people were like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this. I'm fed up with this. I know Christian young people went to their pastors and talked to them about it. Pastors basically said, you're the problem. And so they said, no, you're the problem. And they left, and they're not going back to church. And over politics. The church has driven young people, in some cases, away from the church. Maybe not the faith, but the problem is, guess what happens? The church is now so politically divided that now young people will leave one church because it's too maybe Republican in their politic, and then end up in a church that's too liberal in their politic, and now the kid is rejecting, their whole Christianity is now being defined by their political stance. It doesn't matter if it's left, it doesn't matter if it's right, that's wrong. Young people need to find a church where they can just, learn Christianity. Well, that's a novel idea. Whoa, I got to find a church. And so now, and again, you see this. It depends on where you go. It depends on where you go. You can go to a patriot church and they'll have a huge American flag and it's all, pro-Trump and mixed with QAnon conspiracy theory craziness. Or you can go to a church, find another church that's got a BLM flag, Black Lives Matter flag, and an LGBTQ flag. And it's like, well, so I either have to be this or I have to be that. And if you're just a church that's just a church, then people are like, what's your problem? Okay, we're just trying to be a church. I know it's shocking, but you're not allowed to be that anymore. You've got to take a political stance. You got to take a political stance. So no matter what you respond to now, you have to respond to it from a political perspective. Even if you respond to COVID, you got to do it from a political perspective. How can people have two different approaches to COVID? Well, because it's based off your politic. It shouldn't be based off your politic. The country has been so hijacked politically, and you know why? Vacuums, when you have a kind of an empty space, they only stay empty. Nothing lasts in a vacuum very long. Nothing survives in a vacuum. Well, the culture moved away from what? The Bible and God. So they had to replace it with something. So guess what they replaced it with? Politics. Politics becomes the new religion. Well, guess what? When the church, instead of fighting against the political hijacking, we bought into the political hijacking, and then many of those young people leave because of the political hijacking. Now, many cases, those kids are leaving because they too have been politically hijacked, and they're now trying to find a church that agrees with them politically. That's just as wrong. But you should not be driving anyone away because of your politic. Does that make sense? We cannot do that, all right? Now, we're running out of time. So, what was number one? Scriptural foundation. Is it prophecy? Number 2, empathy. Don't make it about you. Number 3, are they leaving the faith or the church? Number 4, we got to consider how many are leaving because of politics. We have to consider how many are leaving because of politics. A lot are leaving and they're frustrated with it and they're sick of it. Now, next. Now, this one is for the young people leaving. All right? I've been kind of hard on everyone else. Now I'm going to be hard on the people leaving. One of the things that drives me absolutely crazy about many people who leave Christianity is they leave Christianity in a cloud of dishonesty. Because this is usually how the game is played, right? This is usually how the game is played, right? Is there a little kid walking out there? Okay, all right. Okay, they're Twyla. Okay. I was like, there's just there's little kids in our parking lot just walking by themselves. I'm like, what's going on? Okay. I'm like, there's more little kids. Okay. I'm like, all right, we're getting a lot of visitors today of small children unaccompanied by adults. Okay. That could get into a political issue about what's happening at the border, but we won't go there. Okay. All right. So, but here's the thing. A lot of people leave Christianity and they always think they have to have like some kind of justification for their leaving, right? So they always got to find a reason, right? Hey, mom and dad, I'm leaving Christianity because you're hypocrites. You're hypocrites, right? So because now why? Because I got a justification for leaving, right? Or the church is filled with hypocrites, or they've always got a reason, and most likely, right? I mean, which hopefully your young people understand that, we're all hypocrites, right? Okay, but yeah, everyone's a hypocrite to some level. Okay, but the point is, they always feel like they have to have a justification. So they give their great justification, and then almost before the justification comes out of their mouth, then they reveal to you, "Oh, I'm now doing this or involved in this," and go, "Oh, okay, that's why." You realize Christianity is not consistent with the lifestyle you want to choose for yourself, so you feel like you need to come up with a justification. Why not just be honest and say, I'm leaving Christianity because I want this? Just be honest. Why lie? Why try to make yourself feel like you're morally superior? Just acknowledge there's something you want. Christianity says you can't have it, so you're going to do it. Right? I mean, just acknowledge that. Now, the parent has to allow the kid to acknowledge that, right? Now, the parent sometimes will say, well, no, and try to come up with try to argue, and then the kid then has to throw out some kind of justification for it. Don't force them to throw out a justification. Don't make them explain it. Just let them be honest with it. I don't like what Christianity says. Okay, fine. Then by all means, move on. Don't force them into a situation where they have to come up with a justification, because they will come up with a justification. Young people will come, hey, can't you justify everything you've ever done? I bet you can attempt to, right? Right? When you were a kid and you got put in a corner, maybe with school, don't you always try to justify your behavior? Well, I did this because this. I did this. We always try to justify our behavior. Just don't put the kid in the situation where they have to justify it. And for the Christian young people who are thinking about leaving, don't make up a reason. You know why you're leaving. And trust me, everyone's going to know it sooner or later. We've seen that in high-profile cases where some Christian who had written, important Christian books make all of, and then all of a sudden say, well, I'm leaving Christianity, try to offer some kind of half garbage, explanation, and then 5 minutes later we find out, oh, they're involved in this, or they're involved in this, or they're involved in this. And you're like, okay, now we know why you really left. Look, we can acknowledge Christianity gives very strict rules about how we are to live. Yes? Does anybody like those rules? Okay, if you say you do, you're probably lying. Because they go against what? What we want! What we want! All right? Look, this week, for me, most important week of the entire year. This is WrestleMania week, people. All right? I mean, I already watched, 4 hours of wrestling last night, because now every wrestling organization in the world has 50 shows. There's going to be so much wrestling from last night till next Sunday that I could give you a list. It's 50 shows. 4 hours apiece. WrestleMania is 2 nights this year. Instead of just 1 night, it's 2 nights. So, guess what? Guess where I will not want to be? Sunday night. I don't want to be here behind this pulpit Sunday night. I'm praying for a blizzard, an ice storm, 14 tornadoes, the end of the world. I'm praying for COVID cases to jump by 9 million%. Not really. That's hyperbole. I don't want anyone to die. But I would like, maybe a power outage just hits Ovalo. That would be great Sunday night, okay? Maybe I can call the electric company and say, I think you just need to shut down the power Sunday night. Okay, not in Abilene. No. Not in Abilene. But here. Now, guess what? So there's something I want to do, and Christianity says I'm supposed to be where? Now that's, for you, you're like, who cares? That's wrestling. I don't care. Well, yeah, you don't care because you're lost and not a wrestling fan, which is a sign of salvation, right? But guess what? You got nonsense that you like that I don't get. And guess what? When it's your stuff, all of a sudden it matters, right? Christianity has always done that. It always comes along and says, hey, here's the way it's supposed to be. And you're like, I don't like the way it's supposed to be. Now, you can either work to try to live according to it, not going to do it perfectly, or you can just say, you know what? I don't want to live according to it. I'm going to do my own thing. And you know what? I respect that honesty. Just don't have to lie. You don't have to make it up. There's no reason to make it up. You feel better about yourself, but deep down you have to know you made up your excuse. And please, please, young people who leave, just stop blaming everyone else for you leaving. Okay, just stop blaming everyone else. All right, because here's the thing. Your parents may be garbage. Your pastor may be garbage. Your friends may be garbage. All of Christianity may be garbage. But I can guarantee you, the person who hung on the cross 2,000 years shedding his blood to die for you has nothing to do with all of the garbage you have seen within Christianity. And all the garbage you have seen within Christianity, if you were ever honest and look in the mirror, there was plenty of garbage inside of you. Are you pointing at everyone else's hypocrisy? Are you telling me there was no hypocrisy in you? There was no sin in you? There was no failure in you? Now, you may have hid it from your parents. You may have hid it from everyone. But I guarantee you there was lust, there was sin, there was covetousness, there was arrogance, there was pride, there was bitterness. There was all kinds of things inside of you. And so you can condemn your parents all day and say, you're the reason I'm leaving Christianity. It's you. And trust me, even using the politic thing as an excuse, it's still an excuse in my estimation. Now, the parents shouldn't be pushing their politics like that, but you can't use that as an excuse. Your relationship to Christ, your commitment to Christ, nothing else matters there. Look, if I was going to give up on Christianity based on the actions of other people, I think I would have given up on Christianity. I don't know if it was, I think it was a Friday night. I could take you to where the house used to be, right there next to First Baptist Church, Tuscola, Texas. I'm inside listening to Foreigner 4. Ooh, what a controversial album. And the next thing you know, the glass on the front door gets broken out by the pastor's wife. She walks in, grabs me by the ear, pulls me out of the house, and says, I cannot have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ listening to that kind of music. That would have given me pretty good grounds of leaving Christianity. Because the woman was insane. She's walked in that house 50 times and didn't bother to knock, but that day she was going to knock and then smash the glass out like an insane person because she didn't like my music. That's craziness. There's enough that's happened within Christianity that's craziness that would drive me away from Christianity. There's a difference between churchianity and Christianity. Don't allow churchianity to make you leave Christianity. Does that make sense? Right? The year I was at WrestleMania in Dallas, right? I'm there waiting at an indie show with all of these wrestling fans. And then all of a sudden, coming across the street are these Christians marching with signs, wrestling is of Satan, and condemning all of us that we're going to hell because we're watching wrestling, and that we're homophobic because we're watching men wrestle without wearing enough clothes, and all of this nonsense. And I'm sitting there going, what is going on? And then the wrestling fans start getting really mad, right? And then there's this like face-off, right? And I'm like, whoa, everyone, calm down. I'll handle this because I'm a pastor. I'll have an intelligent conversation with these Christians. And what? I get shoved, spat on, and almost a fight breaks out, and the cops have to get called because I'm trying. And that, you tell me you want to leave Christianity? But guess what? That didn't reflect Christianity. It reflected insane people showing up wanting to start a fight with wrestling fans. Of all the things to protest. Especially in this era of wrestling, which is, we call it the PG era, going back to the 90s when it was the Attitude Era, which was so inappropriate that inappropriate was inappropriate. That was some messed up stuff. I couldn't even watch a lot of it. We're in the PG era now. Give me a break. Now they're going to show up? All right, now we could talk about some current storylines where, a person got burned alive, but that's a whole different story. Okay, so maybe that was a little inappropriate where the person did get burned alive and now they've come back as a possessed demon. Okay, but that's a whole different story, okay? But, so there are some storylines that would bother some Christians, I guess, that would bother some people. But you get the idea that could make me want to do what? Walk away. But what do I have to draw the distinction between? Christ and people. And what do I know about people? We're always going to sin. Always going to sin. There are Christians who've done things to me that were really messed up. Tell me they're going to help me, hang up the phone to talk about me. That's messed up. But I can't make that about Christianity. So when young people leave, just make sure you're leaving for the right reason. Just stop making excuses, right? If you're leaving, and stop making excuses. Okay, now I got to go through the next part quickly, all right? Here we go. So, I know we started late. I'm barely going to have time to mention this one. Okay, so we got the scriptural foundation, right? We're not even going to get to the article. We got the scriptural foundation. We got empathy. We got leaving the faith or the church. We've got left because of politics. We got honesty in leaving. And then I want you to consider just briefly soteriology in leaving. What do we mean by soteriology? What do we mean by soteriology? What is soteriology? Study of salvation. That's a simple way to put it, okay? Study of salvation. There are two different schools of thought when it comes to salvation, right? What are those two basic schools of thought? We'll call them election versus free will. Now, how you view a young person walking away from the faith, sometimes as a parent, it can drive you crazy. You can think, what What could I have done? What could I have done? What could I have done? This is where your theology of salvation, soteriology, needs to come into play. If the doctrine of election is true, there's nothing you can do. Now, it doesn't mean you don't try to show them Christianity. It doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility. I'm just saying, ultimately, it's a sovereign work of God. That's beyond your control or ability. Everybody got that? So, now that doesn't excuse it. That doesn't mean, well, I believe in election, I don't need to worry about it. No, you always wish you could have done this different and this different and this different and this different. But you understand that if salvation is the work of God, you can't make someone get saved. You can't do it. I wish I could, but you can't. Right? Praise God. And all you can do is beg God to have mercy and pray that ultimately, because you don't know if that person is elect, they will become saved. That's the one thing. And that's one side of it that's good news. If they're the elect, they're going to be saved and you cannot mess it up. Praise God. But if they're not, you can't make it happen. That's the bad side of it. But some people say, well, that's why I can't believe in election. I can't believe in election because that's insane. Well, then you're left with what? Free will. Now, if their will is truly free, what is the last thing you don't want to do according to that system? You don't want to take away their free will. So by taking a young person and manipulating them to say a prayer, you can manipulate a kid to say a prayer at any point, right? It won't be long that I could pull Lincoln aside and talk to him about heaven, hell, and Christianity and Jesus, and I could probably manipulate a prayer out of him probably within the next year or two, if not now. Right? Well, am I respecting his free will? No, I'm manipulating his will. Well, that can't be Christianity. A manipulated will is not making a free choice, correct? Yes? So if it's a free will, then guess what? You can do everything you can to try to and do what you can, but ultimately their will is what? Free. And if their will is free, they can either freely choose or freely reject. And no matter what you try to do, you're only trying to manipulate the will. But a manipulated will is not a will exercising free will. So if you truly believe in free will, what do you not want to do? You don't want to manipulate it. So guess what? No matter what system you go to, what the parent is somewhat what? Limited. If it's election, it's completely out of your hands. And if it's free will, if you truly believe in free will, then it's out of your hands again because whose will has to make the choice? All you can do is present it to them. And you can try to manipulate it, but I've never understood the manipulation. Because if you manipulate it, they're not exercising their free will. They're exercising your will, trying to be imposed upon their will. Therefore, you're not treating them as if they have free will, which goes against your very theology. So I think from a parent standpoint, we just got to remember, we got to look at it from a theological perspective. Does it bother you when your kid walks away? Yes, but you got to look at it from a theological perspective that ultimately it's out of whose hands? Yours. It really is. All right. And then one last thing. I'll end with this. What do we want to call this? We'll call this systems of parenting. Systems of parenting. When the kid walks away, what do parents immediately start doing? What could I have done better? You start questioning your system. You start questioning your system. Now, the young people don't understand. As parents have to try to empathize with the young people, I wish young people would also learn they need to empathize with what it's like for a parent who is committed to Christ, who believes in heaven and hell, and watch you walk away. If it's psychologically damaging for you to try to walk away, it is excruciating pain for many parents to watch their kids walk away. The kids have to have a little bit of empathy too. It is difficult to see them just throw out Christianity and you're like, what did I do? Because then the parent has to live with hours and hours of regret. But here's the one thing, if there's one thing I've learned in my Christian life, it's this. I have seen every kind of parenting system in the world used within the church. I have seen the ultra-conservative, man. My kids are not going to listen to any secular music. They're not going to watch any secular movies. They're not going to dress a certain way. They're not even going to use slang. They're not going to use the word cool. They're not going to do any of that. I'm going to protect them, protect them, protect them, protect them, protect them. We're going to have family devotions 14 times a day. All they're going to hear is hymns. We're going to be at church 17 hours a day. I'm going to do this. And then I've watched that happen, and then the kids grow up and do what? You tried to brainwash me. You tried to control me. You hurt me. You damaged me. You took away my childhood. And then have like all this bitterness and regret. And then the parents like, what did I do? And then I've seen parents who are very much more at a liberal way. We were very much more liberal than probably a lot of you. And we gave our kids a lot of freedom, right? And let them express their opinions clearly and could call into question. Now, but even though we were more liberal, guess what my kids remember? The time we ever offered a restriction, they remember that restriction as if it was the worst thing in the history of man. We're like, whoa, are you really serious? Of all the things I let you do, and you remember that restriction. Okay? But guess what? It doesn't matter if it's liberal, doesn't matter if it's conservative. There is no parenting system that guarantees a kid's salvation, even though I know you want to go to Proverbs and say, if you raise your kid in the fear and admonition of the Lord, they will not depart. They will not depart from certain aspects of Christianity. Like, kids raised in a Christian home, they walk away with a moral structure. Even if that becomes all messed up, they're going to be the ones to say that's right and that's wrong. And it's really weird. They'll abandon Christianity, but then you'll hear them throw out a moral system, condemning this and like, wait, I thought you were done with Christianity. It's narrow-minded. It's bigoted. Why are you so narrow-minded and bigoted and closed-minded? What? Because they borrow from that. There's some parts of it they can't get away from. But that proverb passage cannot be a guarantee of salvation. It just cannot be. Because listen, if you believe in free will, that can't be the guarantee because you're taking away their free will. And if you believe in election, well, that doesn't work. This is just a general principle, right? So just make sure as a parent, by all means, you can look back. Well, but you know what? And I know this is going to sound like not religious, but you can sit back all day and look back and try to see what you did wrong. Unless you have another kid, you're looking back and trying to figure out what you did wrong. There's no way to go back and fix it now, right? Now, by all means, if you think you did something wrong, please offer the apology to the child. Hey, I think I may have done this wrong. I think I may have done this wrong. Feel free to do that. But you just can't sit there and beat yourself up about it because you can't go back. Yeah, right. But I'm saying you may be able to learn. You may be able to learn from it, but you can't go back. Right. Well, and depending on your even if you go back, there's very little you can do. But I wanted, and I think this is just very important to remember. There are kids, young people, who become Christians in homes where their parents will disown them for becoming a Christian. There are kids who become Christians in countries where they could possibly die for becoming a Christian. There are those of us who became a Christian, and because of my Christianity, it destroyed my relationship with my family. I didn't let it stop me. I didn't let it stop me because I was committed to Christ. So at some point, you can look all day about, man, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? There are kids saved in horrible situations, and their parents are doing everything wrong. Their parents are literally saying, you will not become a Christian. Christianity is a lie. You will not go to church. I've seen young people literally beaten because they went to church. Christian young people do a lot of whining and sometimes Christian young people. That's where I have a hard time with Christian young people. Because some of them raised in good homes, never abused, never sexually assaulted, just their parents always provide for them and a loving environment. And then they whine and whine. It's just like, oh, just shut up sometimes. Just drives me crazy. And then other kids raised in homes where it's like the end of the world, man. It's drugs, it's abuse, it's abandonment, it's insanity. And they become a Christian, read their Bible, go to church, even when they know they may get beat for going. So, as a parent, you can't say, well, my system, why did the kid raised in that kind of home become a Christian? It wasn't based off the parental system, was it? So you can be encouraging it. And in fact, sometimes I've made the joke, the best way to raise your kid is to forbid Christianity. Then they'll be like, oh, I'm going to become a Christian, all right? Because now they got to find a way to rebel. They got to find a way to So sometimes it just drives me crazy the way that works. As a parent, you can't beat yourself up. If a kid can become a Christian in a home where literally it's forbidden, then by all means, you can't then say, well, what could I have done better? What could I have done better? Well, what could you have? You were doing everything better compared to a home where the kid's being beat for being a Christian, right? Yeah, you're doing everything better. Well, guess what? maybe you should be beating your kid for being a Christian because that kid becomes a Christian and your kid doesn't. It's beyond your. There's no parental. Everyone thinks they've got it figured out. There is no parenting system that is guaranteed to work. Why? Because either you believe in election or you believe in free will. And either way, there you go. That's what I want you to see. Now, I'm not saying parents should be like, just do whatever I want. No, you do need to raise your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, whatever that looks like and how that looks. But I'm just saying you got to realize that's all you can do. It's like for me as a pastor, all I can do is stand here and preach, right? I have no guarantee that you are either paying any attention, listen, or even remember 5 minutes after I'm done. And when I start worrying about what you're doing with what I'm doing, then then it's like being a parent. I'm like, why won't they listen? Okay? Why won't they pay attention? Right? Well, it's the same thing. But all we can do is do what? Present Christianity, try to live Christianity, but just think, very important, even if you lived it perfectly, is that going to guarantee salvation? Because I can tell you of a nation by the name of Israel that had God literally leading them. That's pretty perfect to have God leading you. Right? And they still walked away. Adam and Eve, they didn't even have a sinful nature. God is literally walking in the garden talking to them, and they walked away. So you can't do better than God as a parent. And if people can have God literally physically present with them and walk away, and when I say physically present in the Shekinah glory, you know what I mean there. I'll make sure I don't say something heretical. But I mean, he was right there with Israel, leading them by day and by night. And they said, oh, no. We want to go back to Egypt. We're done. We want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back. And guess what? Your kids are going to want to go back to Egypt. And it's not have anything to do with your parenting. It has something to do with what? Their nature. Exactly. All right, let's pray. Lord God, we come before you this morning. Very important subject. Needs to be looked at from so many different perspectives. We didn't even get into the article, but I hope this will spark at least a conversation, maybe bring a challenge to some young people, maybe bring a challenge to parents, and a challenge to the church that there's so many issues related to this abandonment of Christianity by young people today. And there is no easy answer to this, but it is something that should concern and bother all of us. And Lord, if it's a sign that we are somewhere along the prophetic timetable, then Lord, I hope that we are prepared that it's only going to get worse from here. And we ask this in Jesus' name. And God's people said,